hopefully. Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation History number 53. And I'm very lucky this evening that I've got Bede of Britannia as my guest. We may get another guest or two later on, who knows. But we're going to be talking about the Second Afghan War, 1878 to 1880. Now, we've already done a stream on the First Afghan War, and so this is kind of a follow-up to that. For anyone who doesn't know, Britain has fought 4 Afghan wars. The second one is what we're going to be talking about this evening. There was another one in 1919, and of course the most recent one was the complete fucking waste of time that finished fairly recently, which only resulted in hundreds of dead British soldiers and many more maimed and wounded. But this evening we're going to be talking about the Second Afghan War, which in many respects was probably the most successful British Afghan war. However, to give people time to join the stream, etc., I'm going to start us off with a tune.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wall. Your new God's sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made vain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent silent, silent people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days. The lightly prophet laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come thou to search our manhood through all the thankless years. No age with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years. Take up the white.
Sorry, guys. Boomer tech, as always. Yeah, that was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. If you like good music, go and check out Chris Gard's channel on YouTube. And you can also follow him on X on Twitter, where we are also live now. Sadly, our history streams are not as popular as our current events and politics streams, which I think is a great pity because I actually love history, whereas I only do current events and politics because I have to, because my country is being destroyed before my eyes. Britain is just being destroyed, and that's why I do our normal Splendid Isolation streams. But my first love is actually history. So I'm very happy this evening to say I've got Bede of Britannia, who is one of the best guys on my Discord, and I've got many good guys on my Discord. But Bede is a big expert on the part of the world we're going to be talking about. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, Bede, and take it away, mate.
Hello, everyone. Yes, it was about just over a year ago when it was actually, I think, the very second episode of this history series that we actually covered the first Afghan war, and
it was the second episode we did was the first Afghan war. True.
But to your chagrin, annoyingly, because the first episode was about the Battle of I think it was Isandlwana, wasn't it, from the Anglo-Zulu War, and it was your pet peeve that we were covering 2 British defeats in a row.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. We're going to cover 1 British defeat, actually 2, I guess, if you include the embassy siege in Kabul. But actually, this, I think, was the most successful British-Afghan war on the whole.
No, I would agree with you. I mean, though there are some setbacks, overall, this war is much more successful than the first one, which was a total disaster in the grand scheme of things. So just to recap, so in the first Anglo-Afghan War, Britain invades ostensibly to plant the former Emir of Kabul, Shah Shuja, on the throne and depose the current...
Bede, sorry to interrupt you, but can I just say to people in the chat, this is 1838 to 41-42. So, yeah, sorry.
So we're invading to restore Shah Shuja, who was the former Emir of Kabul. And at the time, Afghanistan was broken into 3 emirates: the Emirate of Kabul, the Emirate of Kandahar, and the Emirate of Herat. Kabul and Kandahar were ruled by the dynasty was the hang on, so I'm blanking on this. So it's the Barakzai are the dynasty who ruled those 2 emirates, and then Herat is ruled by the former overlords, which are the Duranis, the Durrani Empire or the Afghan Empire. And at this time, Britain is concerned because the Russians have just tried to organize a proxy war where they just got the Shah of Iran, Mohammed Shah, to try and invade and reconquer Herat, and the British fear this is just going to pave the way for a Russian invasion. And the Russians have been sending agents into Kabul, and so to kind of get a buffer zone in place, they have this former Emir of Kabul, Shah Shuja. They invade, they depose Dost Mohammed, who's the current Emir. put Shah Shuja in place. The issue is they end up being chased out after about a year for a couple of reasons. One, Shah Shuja was not very popular. He's seen as a puppet of the British, and what isn't helped is that he has us do all sorts of horrible revenge murders and reprisals against people who had turned against him, and that obviously completely endears us to the Afghans not. And there's a very famous uprising in Kabul where you have obviously Alexander Burns is quite tragically killed in some street fighting. And
let's also remember, Bede, and I'm sure you know this better than I do. Alexander Burns, who was a British political officer, was also noted for having relations with lots of Afghan girls. And he was helped in this. In the story was that an Afghan took a boy for pleasure, something about a goat, which I probably can't say on YouTube, and only a woman for duty. But he made himself extremely unpopular, did Alexander Burns, who was a Scottish dude.
Yes, cucking all of the local wives probably didn't help his reputation. So, so he's killed. The Afghans under Dost Muhammad's son, who was called Muhammad Akbar Khan. He ends up chasing the British out of Kabul, chases all the way back through the Khyber Pass, where hundreds of British men are killed. We then return a year later in a.
Can I just say, B, when you say chased us out of Kabul, Elphi Bey, which was the nickname of the British general in charge, Elphinstone, who couldn't ride a horse. He had such bad gout he couldn't ride a horse. Instead of occupying the Balahissa, which is the big fortress in Kabul, where the British and Indian troops could have probably held out for as long as they needed to, he agreed to evacuate. He was in this ridiculous cantonment, which was like a barracks with a little low wall around it. And like I said, instead of occupying the Balahissa, which is what he certainly should have done, he agreed to retreat, and he agreed to Afghan lies about, oh no, we won't fire at you and we'll protect you. And of course, none of that happened. And the whole army was slaughtered, basically. Sorry, Peter, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all right. And obviously the famous lone survivor, the doctor who finds his way back to Peshawar, if I recall. So what happens is we return, we come back with this reprisal army, we occupy Kabul, we execute everybody who wronged us, and then we just leave Dost Muhammad in place, kind of going with the idea of better the devil you know. And so he then sits there ruling for about the next 20 years, consolidating his position until he's finally able to unify all of Afghanistan under him and becomes the first emir of Afghanistan in 1855. But a few years later, in 1863, he dies, and because he had lots of sons, all of his sons start fighting over the throne, and there is a 6-year civil war, which finally ends in 1869. So there's kind of three factions. You've got the loyalists, which are the main line descendants of his, and then you've got this offshoot branch from one of his sons known as the Afsalids. And then you've got some other rebels as well, and even some Turkmen from Bukhara got involved in this conflagration. But the war does end with. So Shah Ali Khan, who was the son of Dost Muhammad, he's able to stay on his throne, surviving the civil war. There was a brief deposition in 1866, but he comes back in 1868. So he actually dies in February 1879, so less than a year before the outbreak of the Second War. And what ends up happening is, after his death, one of his relations, Muhammad Yaqub Khan, becomes the emir. and he only rules until October 1879 because, we end up deposing him ultimately because what happens is around this time the Russians are expanding into Central Asia, and so they've already conquered all of Kazakhstan, and they're pushing into the cities of Uzbekistan, and the Russians sent another mission to try and get Yakub Khan to enter an alliance with them, basically saying, if you don't side with us, we'll invade you. And so,
would I be right in saying, Bede? I think I am. The Russians sent this mission to Kabul, which was obviously the Afghan capital. Sorry, I'll put a map up in a minute, guys. They sent this mission to Kabul, and it wasn't asked for by the Afghans. The Russians just said, "Yeah, we are sending you this mission." Yeah. And the Afghans were not powerful enough to say to Russia, "No, you can't do that."
not really, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially. But the problem here is obviously they didn't consider that the British may not take kindly to such actions, and so we then send our own mission, and he tells us to sod off, and very unwisely. And so as a result, we then organize an army and invade. So hence the Second Afghan War. So we move in. It's a bit like the first war initially. We're initially successful. We come in, we depose. What actually ends up happening is Mohammed Yaqub, he decides to go on a diplomatic mission to Russia to try and get Russian aid, and he leaves his son, Mohammed Ayub Khan, in charge while he's gone. But Mohammed Yaqub actually dies on the way in Balkh, and so Mohammed Ayub cedes to the throne as the Emir of Afghanistan. And so we come in, we depose him, and we're able to keep relative order for the next several months. And it's interesting because the actual name of the commander of the British forces was a General Neville Chamberlain. I'm not sure if that's any relation to the Chamberlain family. Do you know Iron Duke at all? Or?
Sorry, I'm trying to find this map. No, I don't, to be honest, Pete. I don't. He was. I can tell you that Neville Chamberlain, the general, was actually quite a good officer. So I can say that, but I don't know if he was related to the famous Chamberlains of Birmingham and what have you.
No, certainly we may have to look at that at another time. So we signed a treaty called the Treaty of Gandamak, and so Afghanistan has become a British protectorate, and Yaqub Ali is to be given an annual subsidy of £60,000, and a Sir Louis Cavagnari is made the British resident, so essentially like a consul of sorts. And it all seems to go well for the next couple of months, and then what happens though is after 3 months, the Afghan regiments in Kabul revolt over a lack of pay, and they storm the British residency and massacre everyone. So very terrible and grisly affair, and obviously that leads to the raising of a punitive force, which is under General Frederick Roberts, who's able to then restore order.
All I would add to that is that Cavagnari, who was actually partially descended from Napoleon Bonaparte, I believe, he was sent there with an escort, a military escort, of about 75 guides infantry and about 25 guides cavalry. And the guides were this, I guess these days we would have called them a special forces unit. They had both infantry and cavalry, which was very unusual for a 19th century military unit. But they were really good blokes under British officers, of course. And Cavagnari's escort of only about 75 blokes actually put up a really, really hard and stiff defense against the enemy. I think there were 2 or possibly 3 British officers with the guides. But there were also, of course, British guys on Cavagnari's staff, and they all fought because they had no choice. But they put up a really hard fight, given they were outnumbered, like 1,000 to 1 or something, by the Afghan troops who attacked them.
No, absolutely. And I have just checked, and Cavagnari, he's actually descended from an Italian noble family that served the Bonaparte, so that's where that connection comes from.
Yeah, no, cool. I knew he had some connections to the Bonapartes, and he obviously, with his name, he's not totally British. But but these guys put up a really stiff defense. There's a novel that I think they made into a TV miniseries called The Far Pavilions, and it has a pretty good episode, which is mostly about this siege and the guides and their British officers trying to defend the residency. It's worth seeing if you haven't seen it.
Oh, sounds interesting. So the main battle that happens in the lead up to the occupation of Kabul is the siege of the Sherpur cantonment, where it's under Roberts. This is 7,000 Anglo-Indian troops versus about 50,000 tribal Afghan warriors. So it's it almost sounds a bit like the Rorke's Drift of Afghanistan, essentially. I mean, looking at the dates, December 1879, so it would have been around the same time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, of course, the British government, which was at this time the Conservative government under Disraeli, actually said to the British High Commissioner in South Africa at the beginning of 1879, we do not want a Zulu war at this time. We've got a big war going on in Afghanistan, and we don't need another war on the other side of the empire. And of course, Sir Bartle Frere, who was the British High Commissioner in South Africa, and Lord Chelmsford, the British Commander in Chief, ignored what the British government said and started the damn war anyway. And then we got Isan Milano, which was the first stream on this series. So there we go.
Certainly. And it should also be mentioned that Cavagnari and his staff were unfortunately killed when they were attacked in September. So, the prospects for what would happen to Roberts' force if they were defeated was very ominous, but they were able to hold out after quite a while. It's 8 days, and what ends up happening, because they can't really get at the British and Indian forces, the rebellion collapses, and that's what paves the way for the us to come in and restore order and get this this treaty, the Treaty of Gandamak. Okay, and so because after he comes in and restores order, Roberts, he obviously has several of the Afghan tribal leaders hung. What actually ends up happening is a bit of intrigue. Abdur Rahman, who was Sher Ali's nephew, he arrives to actually claim the throne for himself. So he was a member of this other branch of the ruling dynasty, because he'd actually fought in the civil war years before as part of the Afghanis.
I was just going to say, Bede, I managed to find a map of Afghanistan, and so people will be able to follow where you're talking about now, hopefully.
I know. Thank you for bringing that up.
Obviously, back in 1878, 1879, 1880, which we're talking about, the area labeled Pakistan would have been part of British India, and Turkestan and Uzbekistan and the other places would have all been part of Russia back then, basically.
It should be noted, though, that the border wasn't finalised because that little panhandle in the east, I think it's called the Pamir Corridor, that was just like a load of tribes in that region, and it was only I think after the Durand line was formalised and negotiations with the Russians, that the Pamir concession was made where Britain and Russia agreed to, Afghanistan can have that, just to make sure there's no physical border between the British and Russian possessions. And it's interesting how that panhandle's managed to persist up to today still.
Yeah, absolutely. And China is only a very tiny way off to the top right-hand corner, by the way.
I know, certainly. Yes, as I was saying, so Abdul Rahman, who is this member of the Afzalis, so he arrives to try and claim the throne of Afghanistan for himself at this time. And now he'd previously palled around with the Russians because during the Civil War he tried to get their support to claim Afghanistan, but been unsuccessful. And Roberts decided to offer him the throne of Afghanistan on the condition that he severs all relations with the Russians, which Abdul Rahman agrees to. And Roberts also believed that he'd be a better suited candidate than Yaqub Ali, because again, I think the main line had proven themselves to be rather fickle, considering Dost Mohammed precipitating the whole original First War, and them obviously cowing to the Russian pressure before. So Abdul Rahman seems to be a much more reliable chap to have in there. And after putting him in, we withdraw our forces. And what's also interesting is that part of the reason we didn't sort of push for more is you mentioned the Tories and Disraeli. Well, there's an election in 1880 which the Liberals win, and Gladstone comes in, and he's one thing you have to understand with the Great Game is the Tories and Liberals have very different attitudes towards the Great Game. The Tories favour something called the sort of the advanced strategy, where the Liberals favour something called the masterly and active strategy, where essentially it's all about
the Conservative idea was the forward strategy, is what it was called. Bede, as I'm sure you know. That was called the forward strategy, and actually was the more sensible one, given that Russia basically spent the whole of the second half of the 18th century and the whole of the 19th century just expanding and expanding. There's a reason Russia is the biggest country in the world. I think the forward school had a good point. I'll talk a little bit in a bit about Gladstone and his disastrous victory from Britain's point of view in 1880 in a bit, but before we do that, I'll let you go on. So.
No, certainly. And so with Gladstone and the Liberals coming in, they didn't want to push for more, and so they were just happy to accept Abdul Rahman coming in and being placed on the throne. And so get a nice moderate victory without risking anything, because I think the Liberals still had probably nightmares over the outcome of the First War and didn't want anything to go wrong. And what also ends up happening, though, at this point is another Afghan prince, sort of Ayub Khan, comes along, and he is the Emir of Herat. And so he invades Afghanistan at this point, trying to claim Kabul for himself. And he actually is able to defeat a small British force at Kandahar.
Yeah, this is the Battle of Maiwand, which is the thumbnail for this stream. And to give people an idea, at the Battle of Maiwand, there were 25,000 Afghan soldiers, including a lot of regular troops, not just tribesmen. And they had 5 batteries of artillery, including breech-loading Armstrong guns. So the Brits go out to attack from Kandahar. They go out to attack this Afghan force with under 2,500 men. And they're not even all British. There's one British battalion, the 66th Foot, which is the Berkshire Regiment. There's one regular British Royal Artillery battery, with rifled muzzle-loading 9-pounder guns, and there is another battery which is being served mostly by infantry soldiers with smoothbores that we captured off the Afghans earlier. And there are 2 Indian infantry regiments and 2 Indian cavalry regiments. And basically, there's a 3-hour artillery bombardment, which the Afghans are easily winning because they've got 5 batteries to the British 1.5, basically. And the 2 Indian infantry regiments end up running away. So do the 2 Indian cavalry regiments, although the Indian cavalry suffer far less casualties because their horses enable them to run away faster. And so the poor old Berkshire regiment, the 66th Foot, are left out on a limb because, they're Englishmen and they don't run away. And our thumbnail is the last 11 at Maiwand, which is the last 11 officers and men of the Berkshire regiment fighting. They held out for ages in some walled enclosures in a village. And eventually, when they had no more ammunition left, these 11 guys charged out with the bayonet, and because that's all they had left. And of course, they were slaughtered by the Afghans. There was a little dog with them called Bobby, which is the little white dog in the thumbnail. He was wounded. He was a sergeant's dog, but he was wounded. He stuck with his master until his master was killed. He got wounded, but he made his way back to Kandahar, where people found him and treated him. And he was taken back to England, where Queen Victoria herself gave him a special medal because she liked dogs. Queen Victoria was a big animal lover. And he kind of became the official mascot for the regiment. Sadly, he got run over by a hansom cab and killed. But Bobby the dog was a big hero from the Battle of Maiwand. And if you go to Reading, and I don't advise it, to be honest with you, Reading is not a good place these days. But if you do go to Reading, you go see this if you want to, which I will put up in the stream in a sec. Where are we? I think that's the one. Yeah, it is. You can go see this, which is this magnificent lion memorial, which is not far outside Reading Station. And that is put up to the dead of the Royal Berkshire Regiment. And all these bronze panels down the side are all the poor buggers who got killed from the Berkshire Regiment. And basically, they got killed because the Indian troops all ran away. That's Clossington. That's my fault. I can't do much about it, mate. Many people have told me, but I can't do much about it at the moment. But anyway, so go and check if you ever are in Reading, which is not a good place to be these days, sadly. That is worth seeing.
Oh, let's check it out if ever in Reading. Well, that's not the only battle. Maiwand. You've also got, as I mentioned, the Battle of Kandahar later, but that is actually a British victory, and it's this time it's led by Frederick Roberts again, and it's the numbers are much more balanced this time. It's 10,000 versus 13,000, and we take very, very light casualties, and and that was a decisive victory. So it wasn't all doom and gloom, thankfully. You had a picture up there, but it's gone now. Oh yeah. Oh, is that a battery?
That's 2 of the British types of gun that were used in the Afghan War. On the left is a little 7-pounder mountain gun that was hauled by mules, which you can see behind. And the other one is a 40-pounder Armstrong gun, which elephants used to pull. It's just an example of the kind of artillery that was used in the Afghan War.
No, certainly. Obviously, at this time, I think there was much bigger guns than that. But I guess based on the terrain where it's so mountainous, you have to use smaller pieces, can't you? You can't have like big, massive any Krupp cannons, so can you? So
a 40-pounder was a huge gun in the late 1870s, early 1880s. That was a very big gun for those days. On land, not on a ship, but on land it was. Yeah.
oh, okay, good to know. Sorry, my knowledge of military equipment is a bit lacking.
Look, British artillery at that stage, 9-pounders were your normal field gun. A little bit later than that, in the late 1880s, early 1890s, field artillery used 15-pounders and horse artillery used 12-pounders. By the time of World War One, field artillery was 18-pounders and the horse artillery were 13-pounders, which is what the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery still uses to this day. So a 40-pounder gun, in terms of a land field gun, was huge back then. But yeah.
No, certainly. Yes. So after the Battle of Kandahar, the war was over. Abdurrahman honours the Treaty of Gandamak, and something I neglected to mention, there was actually a bit of an exchange of territory. So the British realised they couldn't really hold Kandahar, so they end up ceding that to Afghanistan. However, Afghanistan does cede several border territories to Britain. So they cede Quetta, Pishin, Sibi, and Hanai, and Chotiali, and later on, I think in the 1890s, obviously Mortimer Durand finalises the border, and hence the Durand line and the modern boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yeah, absolutely, Bede. Yeah, I got no argument. That certainly is what happened. Would you like to talk a bit about Abdur who ended up running Afghanistan after this war, and his policies? And of course, he was quite a long-lived ruler. Most of the rest of the 19th century, I think he was the Afghan emir.
Yes, he dies actually in. Hang on, I think it's 1901. I'm just double checking. Yes, he dies in 1st October 1901. So he rules Afghanistan for about 21 years, and he's best known as being the strong unifying ruler who comes in after all of these civil wars and uncertainty, and I think ultimately by him, by saying, "Listen, I'll be this sort of neutral guardian of the country, if you like, and not sort of gauging in any kind of Russian or British schemes to expand and just consolidate what I have." He ensured relative peace on the frontier. And it was interesting. He's got a nickname as well called the Iron Emir, and it's largely because he relied a lot on military despotism. And it's also because there was a lot of rebellions against him, and he just was very brutal and cracking down on a lot of them. He appointed a lot of intelligent and effective officers, but he was also known for being quite harsh. But I guess you have to be if you're ruling a country like Afghanistan, considering all of the tribal and ethnic differences.
Yeah, absolutely, Bede. But he did actually, from the British point of view, fulfill his purpose. He kind of kept Afghanistan as a neutral barrier between the British Raj and the expanding Russian Empire. I think you probably agree with that.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And again, ultimately, it was because his ability to just not tolerate any rebellions or uprisings. And I think the problem before is because the dynasty, you had so many different princes running around trying to claim various titles that I think added to the chaos. By us backing him, I think by that point, so many other princes had been killed or gone into exile. There was no one else, I think, to really claim the throne, and he was able to largely manage the country on his own without any kind of pretenders intriguing.
Absolutely. Finally managed to get a picture of Frederick Roberts up on the screen. Frederick Roberts was the British commander in the Afghan War. Very good general. People may or may not know that Lord Wolseley was often called our only general. And Frederick Roberts, VC, you can see he's got his Victoria Cross on there, which he won in the Indian Mutiny. Frederick Roberts was known as our only other general. And it was also Roberts, of course, who brought the main phase of the Anglo-Boer War to a successful conclusion in 1900.
Oh, that's good to know. Seems like a very talented guy.
He was also very brave, as I say. He won the Victoria Cross in the Indian Mutiny. He would never have got into the army today, of course, because he was almost blind in one eye. Like these days, he would have been rejected, but he was actually a very good officer. And sad to say, actually, no, we probably need to go back a bit. In the British Army in the second half of the 19th century, there were two rival groups, and one was called the African Ring under Sir Garnet Wolseley, who was the inspiration for Gilbert and Sullivan's modern Major General. That was called the African Ring, and the reason it was called that is that most of Wolseley and his blokes' military experience was in Africa. The other ring was called the Indian Ring, but of course they were all British, these guys, and it was called the Indian Ring because most of their experience had been in India and in Afghanistan and Burma and what have you. And Roberts was the leader of the Indian Ring. And when the Anglo-Boer War broke out in 1899, and we will do streams on the Anglo-Boer War at some stage, guys. Buller, who was Wolseley's protege, was made the British commander-in-chief. And Buller, who was a great and very brave major, was a piss-poor colonel and a terrible general. And he fucked it up. I mean, he started a battle at Colenso, which he never finished. Then he started another battle, which he never finished. Then he gave command to a bloke called Sir Charles Warren at Spiankop, which the Brits won, but then abandoned the hill afterwards. And Buller did nothing except withdraw the troops at the end of it. And then he eventually managed to win later on. Fourth time lucky. And at Colenso, Roberts' only son, what Buller did was some of the Royal Artillery got too close to the Boer marksman, and a modern magazine rifle in 1899 could kill you dead at 800 yards quite easily. And these artillery guys got too close. Then they had to abandon some of the guns. And Buller, because he just decided to call the battle off, was just going to leave these 12 guns in front of the Boer positions so they could all be captured. And a load of British officers and soldiers volunteered to say, no, we'll try and pull them back so that they're not lost to the enemy. You know, it's a disgrace to lose guns to the enemy, or it was in those days anyway. And one of the guys who volunteered for this was Lieutenant Fred Roberts, who was this Roberts' only son. And he was shot and mortally wounded trying to do it. And so that's why I think you can see it on the Chris Guard song that we always open these streams with. When Roberts is arriving in South Africa, Roberts has got a black armband on, and that's for the death of his son. But anyway, once Roberts took command in South Africa, he fairly quickly captured Bloemfontein and then Johannesburg and then Pretoria. Of course, the guerrilla war went on for ages afterwards, but you know that was hardly Roberts' fault. But yeah, so that's that.
No, fascinating. It's always interesting to hear about these sort of military families. You know, these great generals whose their own sons go into the service. Because I remember we talked about last time, but because the father of Mortimer Durand, who namesake of the Durand line, fought in the first Afghan war. So father and son are sort of intriguing.
It's very common, Bede. You know, even in World War II, you can find generals with names that you can associate with the Anglo-Zulu War or what have you, because it's the same family still serving in the army. Yeah, same thing happened in the Navy as well, by the way.
Interesting. And yeah, just to talk a bit more about these sort of boundaries. It was interesting because thank you for bringing the map up again. So yes, Kandahar, which Britain was forced to cede, is that bit of Pakistan that's just directly borders Afghanistan near where Jalalabad is. It's kind of a long, thin, like border strip. But whereas I think the bits Afghanistan ceded to us were further down near where Balochistan is, the bit that borders Iran. And it should also be noted because this wasn't the last time there'd be any kind of incidents in Afghanistan involving the Russians, because a few years later, in the late 1880s, there was an attempt for the Russians and British to set up a boundary commission to formally establish the boundaries between Afghanistan, Iran, and Russian Central Asia. And the Russian general Komarov uses this as an intrigue to try and push for more territory, leading to what was known as the Panjshir Incident, which is this little bit of territory that's now part of Turkmenistan, but was then considered part of Afghanistan. So it's an oasis the Russians occupy, and there's a bit of a standoff with the Afghans and the Russians, where the Afghans end up leaving, but the British then issue an ultimatum saying if the Russians don't leave, it'll lead to war. So the Russians end up withdrawing. But then when the Boundary Commission reconvenes a couple of years later in 1887, there's a bit of a revival. So there's like a jigging of the boundary, so to speak, and their territories are moved around, and the Russians are eventually given Panjshir, but they have to make other concessions further along the frontier. But the Pamir region, which
it's interesting, Bede, because when Gladstone comes to power, the hypocritical, self-righteous asshole that is Gladstone, you will gather I don't like him very much. He tried to copy the Afghan settlement in the Transvaal in the South African Republic. And he gave them independence, but with British sovereignty over their foreign policy, which of course the Boers ignored. much more than the Afghans did, because there was not much of a British army on their border in some area. And as a result, like 25,000 British soldiers died in the Second Anglo-Boer War from 1899, which was inevitable after Gladstone's in all but name surrender in 1880. And then, of course, he ended up invading Egypt to secure the Suez Canal. Then, most reluctantly, he ended up fighting in Afghanistan. In the Sudan, I beg your pardon, because of the Mahdi's rebellion down there. And of course, he sent Gordon out thinking, Gordon would cover his ass. Whereas Gordon, when he got to Khartoum, said, well, I'm not going to leave if I can't get all the women and children out of this place. And, Gladstone, who, like I say, was a self-righteous hypocrite, he didn't care about the women and children in Khartoum at all. And he just said, well, you can send me messages. That means you can get out. And he sent a relief force far too late. And, of course, the Wolseley's relief force arrived too late. And General Gordon was killed, which, of course, later on led to another war in the Sudan when the British reconquered the damn place from barbarism and slavery, which had been turned into. But also, you've been talking about the Panjshir incident, Bede, and one of the reasons that Gladstone and his vile cabinet used to withdraw from the Sudan was the Panjshir incident. And of course, everyone who knows what a vile, cowardly, self-righteous arsehole Gladstone was, knows full well that he was never going to fight over Panjshir, actually. He just used it as an excuse to not fight in the Sudan anymore. The only British politicians I detest more than Gladstone are obviously Tony Blair and probably Harold Wilson, but and probably Churchill as well, actually, but whatever. Anyway, that was a bit of a digression by me. I beg your pardon.
No, that's quite all right. Yes, and of course, regarding all these border incidences, obviously I mentioned that there's a bit of rejigging around in the east in Afghanistan because there's all these little princely states such as Chitral, and we have to send like soldiers off, and there's all these little skirmishes and tribal warfare trying to map out and secure this frontier, and we even send people like Francis' young husband to map out the area, and that's how we've ended up with that Afghanistan's funky borders.
And of course, there was the young husband killed at Isandlwana in the Anglo-Zulu War, and that was the same family. Siege of Chitral, quite well known. That was in the 1890s, I think, 1895, I think. Siege of Chitral. That's up here near the. Up here, by the way, is China. So it's quite near the Chinese border as well.
Yeah, certainly just getting all the frontiers secured. And it's also interesting because when Abdur Rahman dies, obviously his son Habibullah takes over, and I actually discussed him on another stream I did with AM Iron Duke because he's interesting because essentially because he was actually assassinated, and his assassination and replacement was one of the causes of the Third War, which we'll get into in a future stream. But it's also just interesting looking at how important Afghanistan is seen by those who want to try and threaten British India, first by the Russians, but the Germans have this crackpot scheme, and thanks to von Oppenheimer, who was this Orientalist advisor of the Kaiser's, and Oppenheimer believes that to destroy British power, we have to weaponize the Ottoman Empire and cause like a global jihad. And oh yes, we need to just send some soldiers and ne'er-do-wells off to Afghanistan and just give the emir some, a big chest of money and some weapons, and yeah, he'll rise up and invade British India for us. And Habib Bula, to his credit, is like, okay, I'll consider it, but yeah, if you're able to bring, millions of pounds of money and tens to hundreds of thousands of military equipment, etc., and get it all here without incident, then yeah, sure, I'll fight your jihad for you. And it's at that point the Germans realised, oh shit, we've got to get this all the way through Europe for the Ottoman Empire, for Iran, which we haven't even secured and which has like no infrastructure at this time. So yeah, it was again a bit of a silly waste of time that.
Oh, absolutely, and I mean, of course, if you want to look at the difficulty of Russia using Afghanistan as an avenue into what was then British India, I mean, just look at the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which didn't really go so well for them, and then of course our own Fourth Afghan War alongside the Americans and various other people, which didn't go very well for us either, to be quite honest. As far as I'm concerned, everyone who died in Afghanistan between 2000 and 2020 or whatever it was, I think the Brits left in about 2018 or 19 maybe, and it was so bad we even had to bring our war memorials back to Britain with us because they would have all been destroyed otherwise, of course. Yeah, complete waste of fucking time and effort. And who runs Afghanistan today? Well, it's the Taliban. Who ran Afghanistan in 1999? It was the Taliban. What was the point? What was the bloody point?
Yes, you invade to remove the Taliban, only to get the Taliban, or you've just had to spend millions of pounds of wasted money, really. So,
and thousands are dead. But yeah,
absolutely. Okay, Via Negativa is asking for recommendations. Well, the only book I've really read on this is the book The Great Game by Peter Hopkirk. So that was an interesting read if you're interested in The Great Game.
I've read that. Bede is quite a good book. Yeah, it's not bad. That is quite a good book.
I can't recommend anything specifically on this conflict, but yeah, that one's pretty good on The Great Game, and he does mention this conflict and all the Afghan wars.
There's a pretty good military history book called My God, My Wand. I can't remember the author now, but it's called My God, My Wand, and that's pretty good if you like military history. It's not very thick and it's got loads of illustrations. That's pretty cool.
Oh no, it sounds interesting.
I think it's I think it was written by the same guy who wrote a book about the Sudan, and he also did one about the Anglo-Zulu War. Someone's mentioning Osprey publishing Anglo-Afghan Wars. Yeah, that'll be all right, Richard. They're generally fairly sound, those books. I mean, they're thin and they're only looking at certain things, but yeah, they're generally pretty sound. Sorry, B.
No, that's okay. I was going to mention his comment anyway. Never read Osprey, but I've heard they're good for like visualized military history. Specifically, I think Charlemagne said they're one on.
Sorry, they're good on uniforms, equipment, and to some degree weapons for the most part. Yeah, fair enough.
Charlemagne, I remember saying that their one on the Suez Crisis was quite good.
Yeah, fair enough. I tend to try and look for stuff that combines military and geopolitical history. There are some on Afghanistan, but they tend to be a bit older for the most part. There's nothing, as far as I know, on Afghanistan, um, the equivalent of, say, something like the washing of the spears on the Anglo-Zulu War. There isn't anything on Afghanistan equivalent to that, as far as I know. As I say, the only one I really know is "My God, My Wand," and I can't remember who wrote that. But Google it, guys. You can find that pretty easily.
Just having a look now online, just seeing what other stuff there is, and there's books on the First War. In fact, there seems to be loads on the First War, quite popular.
Yeah, there are many more on the First Afghan War than the Second. There's one called Signal Disaster, written by some Scottish dude whose name escapes me at the moment. That's not bad on the First Anglo-Afghan War. There's not so much on the Second, to be honest. If I was a military historian today, I'd be looking at the Second Afghan War, to be honest. But, given the British Army seemed to have forgotten everything about Afghanistan by the time it went there in 2000 or so, what a surprise, really,
No, certainly. Looking at, there's some others which cover all the conflicts in one, so that's probably good to look at those.
Yeah, I mean, just put the Afghan Wars or the Second Afghan War into Google, and I'm sure it will give you some suggestions. I can't think of many that I can absolutely recommend, to be honest. Certainly, if you go look at Wikipedia, for example, its Second Afghan War page is terrible. It's been written by Afghans, I would presume, basically. But maybe the Taliban wrote it. It's not very accurate, put it that way. But yeah, all right. Richard Hughes is mentioning Redcoat history. Yeah, excellent channel it is. I don't think he's done anything on Afghanistan, but he is a good channel. I'll agree with that. The other bloke I would recommend you to check out, Richard Hughes. If you like Redcoat history, go and check out Rob's channel, Canadian guy, called British Muzzle Loaders. It's called British Muzzle Loaders, and it's run by Rob, who is a Canadian of Scottish heritage. And that's an excellent channel if you like British military history. Really good.
You may have to give that a watch. On this conflict, I've said everything I think that was important to say, which we've elaborated on. Was there anything else you wanted to go over, Duke? Or
no, I think you've covered most of it, mate. I didn't do a history stream last week. The reason I didn't, by the way, people, is that the guest who's doing Captain Cook with me wasn't available. He wasn't available this week either. So that's why we will do Captain Cook Part 2 when he is available. I've been doing that with AI Shiatori, who you all know, Bede and other people. And he's not been available for a couple of weeks, but we'll do Part 2 in due course, which will basically cover Captain Cook's 3 great voyages of exploration. So yeah.
I know it sounds really interesting. AI is a good chap.
He is too. Would you like to plug your channel, Bede?
Yes. At the moment, I'm working on a series on modern Iran with my good friend Hunger. the next stream should be this Saturday on the 4th of April. We'll be looking at the part of the reign of Reza Shah. We'll be covering the sort of his economic modernization of Iran in the 20s and 30s. So if you're interested, give that a watch. Other than that, haven't got much else planned other than a follow-up to the stream I did with Marcus on Belisarius. We'll be getting into the Gothic War. That will probably be next month now, because Marcus has got his hands tied with some other things.
Yeah, Marcus owes me a stream. I'm supposed to be doing a stream with him on Julius Caesar, which he keeps avoiding. But anyway, Vian Getty Var in the chat. He's talking to Richard Hughes and he's saying, thanks for the recommendations. He's desperate for some Victorian sources. Can I say to you, mate, you need to go on Google or whatever search engine you use and look for the Victorian Military Society. And you will find they have a lot of really good stuff. But yeah, go and look up the Victorian Military Society, and you will find some really good Victorian sources for quite a lot of stuff. And if you go back far enough, you'll even find some stuff I wrote for them, but you'll have to go back a damn long way. But yeah. But look up the VMS, the Victorian Military Society. They're cool. Guys, do go and check out Bede of Britannia's channel. It's excellent. We will be back on Saturday British time, looking at stuff like current events, politics, and all the bullshit that's going on today. Do go and join Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain, please. If you like Britain, that's who you should join, as far as I'm concerned. I think they're our last political chance. But yeah, we'll see you on Saturday, gents. Thank you very much to Bede of Britannia for joining me this evening. And see you on Saturday. Go well.
See you around.